And I'm Erin, 34, and I'll never forget the look on my mother-in-law's face when she realised who my father was. For 3 years, Vivian had treated me like an unwanted accessory in her son Nathan's life, constantly undermining and excluding me. But that night at dinner, when she smugly announced I wasn't welcome on their luxury family cruise, something inside me finally snapped. I calmly picked up my phone and called my dad, the owner of Sullivan Cruise Lines, to cancel their tickets. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Have you ever had a moment when you finally stood up to someone who mistreated you? Share in the comments below and let's get started. My story with Nathan began 4 years ago at a charity gala in Boston. I was working as an event coordinator, ensuring everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. With my clipboard in hand and communication earpiece firmly in place, I was darting between the kitchen and the ballroom when I literally collided with him. "I am so sorry," he said, steadying me with hands that were surprisingly strong for a man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. Coffee from his cup had splashed onto my simple black dress, and he looked genuinely distressed. "Please let me pay for the cleaning." "It's just water," I laughed, glancing down at the spreading stain. I always carry dark beverages at these events. Lesson learned from my first gala disaster. His smile was immediate and warm, lighting up his face in a way that made my heart do a little stutter step. "Smart strategy. I'm Nathan Hamilton, by the way." "Erin Sullivan," I replied, shaking his offered hand. And as much as I'd love to continue this conversation, I have 300 hungry donors waiting for their main course to be served on time. "Can I get your number?" he asked quickly as I turned to leave. "For non-stain-related purposes?" That made me laugh again. "Bold move, Mr. Hamilton." "Too bold." His expression was so earnestly hopeful that I found myself reaching for his phone. "Just bold enough," I said, inputting my number before hurrying back to work. What Nathan didn't know then, what nobody at these events ever knew, was that my father owned Sullivan Cruise Lines, one of the largest luxury cruise companies in the world. I could have been directing these events rather than coordinating them, could have been attending as a guest rather than staff. But my father had raised me with a strong work ethic and a belief that true character develops through earning your own way. "Money can buy respect, Erin," my father always said, "but it can't buy character, and it certainly can't buy genuine connection." So I kept my background quiet, letting people know me as just Erin, the hard-working event coordinator with a talent for organisation and crisis management. It was a choice that had served me well, allowing me to form authentic relationships with people who liked me for myself, not my family connections. Nathan called me the very next day, and our relationship developed with a whirlwind intensity that took me by surprise. He was a successful architect with his own firm passionate about sustainable design and historic preservation. He had an easy confidence about him that never tipped into arrogance, and a genuine interest in others that made everyone feel valued in his presence. "Tell me about your family," he asked on our third date, a picnic in Boston Public Garden. "Not much to tell," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. My mother had passed away when I was in college, and it was just my father and me. Dad raised me on his own after Mom died. He works in the travel industry. "What about yours?" Nathan's expression shifted slightly. "My family is complicated. My father Gregory is great. Quite supportive, loves his woodworking hobby more than his actual investment job. My mother Vivian is..." He paused, searching for the right words. "She's very focused on appearances, the right schools, the right neighborhoods, the right social connections. New money trying to act like old money, I suggested." He looked surprised. "That's exactly it. My grandfather struck it rich in real estate development, and my mother has spent her entire life trying to cement our family's place in Boston society. And how does that work out for her?" Nathan laughed, but there was an edge to it. "About as well as you'd expect. The actual old money families see right through it, which just makes her try harder." I should have recognized the warning signs then, but I was already falling for Nathan. His kindness, his passion for his work, the way he could spend hours talking about architectural details that most people would find boring, but somehow made fascinating. By our 6th date, I was completely smitten. Meeting his parents for the first time was an experience I'll never forget. Vivian Hamilton lived up to every description Nathan had given, and then some. Their home in Beacon Hill was beautiful, but felt like a museum with furniture that looked too delicate to actually use, and artwork that seemed chosen more for its value than any aesthetic appeal. "So you're an event planner?" Vivian said when Nathan introduced me, her tone suggesting she'd just discovered I collected garbage for a living. "Event coordinator," I corrected gently. "For Ridgeway Events. We handle many of Boston's major charity functions." "How nice," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've attended several Ridgeway events. I don't recall seeing you there." "I'm usually behind the scenes making sure everything runs smoothly." "Of course." She nodded, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Service roles are so essential." Nathan squeezed my hand, a silent apology. "Erin's actually brilliant at what she does. The Prentice Foundation specifically requested her for their annual gala after she saved their event last year when their venue flooded." Vivian's smile remained fixed in place. "How resourceful. Nathan, darling, did you tell Erin about the Kennedy party we attended last weekend? Caroline was asking about you." And so it went throughout dinner. Every time Nathan tried to highlight something about me, Vivian would redirect the conversation to their social connections or subtly remind me of the status gap she perceived between her son and me. Gregory, Nathan's father, said little but offered kind smiles and actually seemed interested when I discussed my work. By the end of the evening, it was clear Vivian Hamilton had decided I wasn't good enough for her son and nothing was going to change her mind. "I'm so sorry about my mother," Nathan said as we drove home. "She can be difficult." "It's fine," I assured him, though it wasn't. "She's protective of you. I get it. Still, there's no excuse for how she treated you. I'll talk to her." But I knew talking wouldn't change anything. Vivian had made her judgment based on what she thought she knew about me, that I was a working-class girl without the social pedigree she wanted for her son. The irony, of course, was that the Sullivan family fortune dwarfed the Hamiltons' wealth many times over. Not that it mattered to me. I had long ago decided that people who only valued me for my family's money weren't worth my time. I could have told Nathan the truth then, could have let him tell his mother who my father was. But I didn't want that to be the reason Vivian accepted me. I wanted her to see my worth as a person, not as a connection. In retrospect, that may have been naive of me. Nathan proposed 6 months later on a weekend trip to Cape Cod. We were walking along the beach at sunset and he got down on one knee in the wet sand, pulling out a vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "I know it's fast," he said, looking up at me with those earnest eyes that had first captured my heart. "But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Erin Sullivan. Will you marry me?" Despite my concerns about Vivian, I said yes without hesitation. I loved Nathan, and I believed our relationship was strong enough to weather his mother's disapproval. Little did I know how that decision would test us both in the years to come. Our engagement set off a chain reaction of events that quickly spiraled beyond my control. The moment Vivian heard the news, she shifted into full wedding planning mode, calling me daily with suggestions that felt more like commands. "The Fairmont Copley Plaza has an opening next June," she informed me during one of these calls 2 days after our engagement. "I've put a tentative hold on it. They know the Hamilton family, of course." "That's very thoughtful, Vivian," I said carefully. But Nathan and I were thinking of something smaller, maybe on the coast. "Smaller?" Her voice dripped with disapproval. "Darling, a Hamilton wedding is a social event. We have connections to maintain. Nathan's position in the community demands a certain standard." This became our pattern. Vivian would make grandiose plans befitting her vision of her family's status, and I would gently push back, trying to create the intimate, meaningful ceremony Nathan and I actually wanted. "She's driving me crazy," I admitted to my father during one of our weekly dinners at his Back Bay penthouse. "Yesterday, she sent me a spreadsheet of acceptable florists, all of which cost more than my annual salary." Dad chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he was amused. At 62, Robert Sullivan was still a handsome man with silver-streaked dark hair and the same green eyes I'd inherited. You could put a stop to all this, you know. One mention of the Sullivan name and she'd be falling all over herself to please you. "That's exactly why I won't do it," I said firmly. "I don't want her respect because of who you are. I want her to respect me for who I am." "Noble, but perhaps impractical," Dad observed, sipping his wine. "Have you considered that you're making things harder for yourself and Nathan?" I had, of course. Nathan was caught in an impossible position trying to support my wishes while managing his mother's expectations. Our disagreements about the wedding were creating the first real strain in our relationship. "Would you let me host the wedding on one of the ships?" Dad offered. "The Serenity will be in port next spring. We could have a beautiful ceremony on the top deck at sunset with just your closest friends and family." It was a tempting offer. Sullivan Cruise Line's flagship, the Serenity, was a floating palace of luxury and elegance. A wedding there would be both intimate and spectacular. It's a generous offer, Dad, but no. If we did that, I'd have to explain to Nathan's family who you are, and then the whole dynamic would change. I shook my head. Besides, Vivian would just use it as an opportunity to network with your business contacts. In the end, we compromised on a moderately sized wedding at a historic lighthouse on the Massachusetts coast. Vivian was disappointed but somewhat appeased by the exclusivity of the venue and the 4-figure per-plate catering bill. The wedding day itself was a study in passive-aggressive behavior from my new mother-in-law. She arrived in a cream-coloured dress that was perilously close to white. She inserted herself into every photo, often physically positioning herself between Nathan and me. When my father walked me down the aisle, she loudly whispered to her friend, "No mother, such a shame." Dad, bless him, maintained his dignity throughout, giving no indication that he was anything other than a modestly successful businessman. When Vivian condescendingly asked him about his little travel company, he simply smiled and said, "It keeps me busy." Nathan noticed some of his mother's behavior and tried to run interference, but he missed the subtle digs, the sideways glances, the way she'd introduced me to guests as Nathan's bride, rather than by my name. Gregory, quieter, but more observant than his son, occasionally shot me apologetic looks, or gently redirected his wife when her behavior became too obvious. Despite Vivian's best efforts, the day was still magical. Nathan's eyes when he saw me walking down the aisle, our personally written vows that left not a dry eye in the house, the way my father beamed with pride as he gave me away. These moments outshone any negativity Vivian tried to inject. After the wedding, Nathan and I settled into our first home together, a charming 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow in Cambridge that we'd fallen in love with for its character and history. Nathan had restored many of the original features himself, and we'd furnished it with a mix of vintage finds and modern pieces that reflected both our tastes. Vivian's first visit to our home set the tone for many interactions to come. "It's cozy," she said, running a finger along our dining room table as if checking for dust. "Of course, older homes do have their challenges. So much maintenance." "That's part of their charm," Nathan replied, putting his arm around my waist. "Erin and I love the history here." "Well, it's a nice starter home," Vivian conceded with a thin smile, "though I've always pictured you in Beacon Hill, darling. Something with a bit more presence." "Mum," Nathan said with an edge to his voice, "this isn't a starter home. This is our home. We chose it together and we love it." Vivian looked genuinely confused. "But surely as your practice grows, you'll want something more befitting your position, something that makes more of a statement." "This house makes exactly the statement we want it to," I interjected. "That we value quality craftsmanship and creating a warm home over making an impression." My mother-in-law's lips pursed as if she'd tasted something sour. "I suppose that's one perspective," she said, clearly implying that it was the wrong one. That first year of marriage was a continuous exercise in boundary setting and compromise. Sunday dinners at the Hamilton house became a dreaded obligation, each one featuring some new slight or dismissive comment from Vivian. Nathan would notice the more obvious ones and speak up, but he missed the subtle digs, the way she'd exclude me from family conversations or reference events I hadn't been invited to. "You're overreacting," he'd say sometimes when I pointed out these moments on the drive home. "Mom's just set in her ways. She doesn't mean anything by it." But she did mean something by it. Every exclusion, every backhanded compliment, every time she accidentally called me by the wrong name was a deliberate reminder, "You are not one of us. You are not good enough for my son." I tried everything to win her approval. I volunteered for the same charities she supported. I offered to help with family gatherings. I asked her advice on recipes and home decor. Nothing made a dent in her armor of disapproval. Through it all, I maintained my silence about my own family background. Sometimes, after a particularly cutting remark about my modest upbringing, I was tempted to casually mention that my modest trust fund could buy and sell their entire family fortune several times over. But I resisted the urge, still clinging to the hope that Vivian would eventually see me for who I was, not what I was worth. Looking back, I realized I was asking for something Vivian was incapable of giving. In her world, people were valuable only for what they could provide. Status, connections, validation. The idea of accepting someone simply for their character was as foreign to her as the concept of flying would be to a fish. But understanding that would come much later. First, things had to get much worse. As our second year of marriage progressed, the tension with Vivian escalated from passive-aggressive comments to more active exclusion. It began with small things, forgetting to include me on emails about family events, scheduling dinners when she knew I had work commitments, setting me away from Nathan at family gatherings. "Did you see the email about the Labor Day weekend at the Cape House?" Nathan asked one evening as we were making dinner together. I looked up from the vegetables I was chopping. "What email?" "Mum sent it yesterday, about the family weekend at the Cape House. She's reserved it for the extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone." "I didn't get any email," I said, though I wasn't surprised. This was becoming a pattern. Nathan frowned, pulling out his phone and scrolling through his messages. "That's weird. She sent it to everyone. Let me forward it to you." When the email appeared in my inbox, I saw that it had indeed gone to everyone. Nathan, his father, his sister Charlotte, and her husband, various aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone except me. "It's not an oversight, Nathan," I said quietly. "She deliberately left me off." "I'm sure it was just a mistake," he insisted, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "I'll call her and make sure she knows you're coming too." "That's not the point," I tried to explain. "The point is that after 2 years of marriage, your mother is still actively trying to exclude me from family events." The Cape weekend proved to be even more uncomfortable than I'd anticipated. Vivian had arranged the sleeping arrangements so that Nathan and I were in separate bedrooms, claiming she needed to accommodate an elderly aunt who couldn't handle stairs. When Nathan protested, she looked wounded. "I'm just trying to take care of family, darling. Surely Erin understands that family needs come first." The emphasis on family was subtle but unmistakable. The message was clear: I might be married to Nathan, but I wasn't really family. Throughout the weekend, Vivian orchestrated conversations around shared memories and inside jokes that deliberately excluded me. She arranged activities without consulting my interests or abilities, then acted surprised when I struggled with the advanced sailing excursion she'd planned. "Oh dear, I forgot you didn't grow up around boats," she said with false sympathy as I returned to shore, early, seasick and humiliated. "It's just second nature to the Hamilton family, you know. We've been sailing these waters for generations." The irony, of course, was that I'd practically grown up on boats. My father had taught me to sail our family's small sunfish when I was 8, and I'd spent countless summers cruising on his company's ships. But this particular day, a migraine had left me dizzy and nauseous, something Vivian had dismissed when I'd mentioned it at breakfast. By Sunday evening, I was emotionally exhausted from navigating the minefield of Vivian's orchestrated exclusions. When she announced plans for the annual Hamilton Christmas ski trip to Vail during dinner, deliberately avoiding eye contact with me, something inside me snapped. "Will I be receiving the email about this trip, Vivian, or should I just assume I'm not invited to this family event either?" I asked, my voice calm, despite the storm brewing inside me. A hush fell over the dinner table. Nathan's sister Charlotte looked uncomfortable, while her husband suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. Gregory's eyes darted between his wife and me, while Nathan stiffened beside me. Vivian's smile never faltered. "Why, Erin, what a thing to say. Of course you're invited. You're Nathan's wife." "Kuteng steady, adisipisti makwan." Am I? Because based on this weekend and the numerous other oversights over the past 2 years, it seems like you're doing everything possible to pretend I'm not part of this family. "Erin," Nathan murmured, placing a hand on my arm. "This isn't the time." "Then when is the time, Nathan?" I asked, turning to look at him. "When is the right time to address the fact that your mother consistently treats me like an unwelcome intruder?" "I think you're being a bit dramatic, dear," Vivian said with a condescending smile. "Perhaps it's that artistic temperament of yours." "I'm an event coordinator, not an artist," I replied. And noticing a consistent pattern of exclusion isn't being dramatic, it's being observant. Nathan's grip on my arm tightened slightly. "Mom, Erin has a point. There have been some oversights that seem to happen consistently." Vivian's facade cracked slightly, a flash of irritation crossing her features before she composed herself. "I'm sorry if you felt excluded, Erin. That certainly wasn't my intention. We Hamiltons have our traditions, and sometimes I forget that not everyone understands our ways." It wasn't an apology. It was another dig wrapped in a veneer of politeness, but I was too tired to fight anymore. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, equally insincere. "I'm sure with a little effort we can work things out." The tension dissipated somewhat, but the remainder of the dinner was strained. On the drive back to Boston the next day, Nathan and I had our first serious fight about his mother. "You embarrassed her in front of the entire family." He set his hands tight on the steering wheel. "She's been embarrassing me for 2 years," I countered. "Why is it only a problem when I stand up for myself?" "That's not fair. Mum is trying. She's just set in her ways. Set in her ways of treating me like I don't belong in your family. That's not a quirk, Nathan. That's deliberate cruelty." He sighed heavily. "You don't understand. Family is everything to her. It's how she defines herself." "And I'm your family now," I reminded him. "Or at least I should be." "You are," he insisted. "But Mom comes from a different generation. She has certain expectations about how things should be done. And I'll never meet those expectations because I wasn't born into the right family or the right social circle." I said the truth of it, settling heavily between us. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. "Give her time," he finally said. "She'll come around." But I was beginning to doubt that. Vivian had made her judgment about me from day one, and nothing I'd done in 2 years had changed her mind. I was beginning to wonder if anything ever would. My career advancement only added fuel to the fire. 6 months after the Cape Weekend incident, I was promoted to event director at my company, a significant step up that came with a substantial raise and greater creative control. Nathan was thrilled for me, taking me out to a celebratory dinner at one of Boston's finest restaurants. When we shared the news with his parents the following Sunday, Gregory offered genuine congratulations. Vivian's response was predictably undermining. "How nice for you," she said with a thin smile. "I'm sure Nathan's connections in the architecture world have been helpful in advancing your career." "Actually, Vivian, my promotion was based on the Phillips Foundation Gala I organised last month," I corrected her. "It raised record funds and got coverage in several national publications." "Yes, well, having the right husband certainly opens doors in Boston society," she persisted. "The Hamilton name carries significant weight." I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that if I'd wanted to use family connections to advance my career, I could have done so much more effectively with the Sullivan name. Instead, I'd worked my way up from assistant to director on my own merit, something Vivian seemed incapable of comprehending. The holidays that year brought another painful example of Vivian's determination to exclude me. At the Hamilton family Christmas gathering, she orchestrated a family photo session, carefully positioning everyone in front of the elaborately decorated tree in their Beacon Hill home. Nathan stand next to Charlotte, Gregory behind Nathan, Aunt Margaret and Uncle William on the left. She directed everyone into place without once mentioning me. I stood awkwardly to the side, waiting for her to include me in the arrangement. She never did. "Erin, would you mind taking the photo?" she finally asked, holding out the camera with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We want to make sure everyone's in it." "Everyone except me," was the clear implication. Nathan, engrossed in a conversation with his cousin, didn't notice what was happening until the photographer Vivian had hired arrived and began setting up his equipment. "Where's Erin going to stand?" he asked, looking around for me. "Oh, I thought she could take some behind-the-scenes photos with her phone," Vivian replied smoothly. "You know how good she is at organising these things. Mom Erin is part of this family. She should be in the official photos." Vivian's smile tightened. "Of course, darling. I just thought, well, these photos are for the Hamilton family Christmas card. They go out to all our old family friends, business associates." "And Erin is my wife," Nathan said firmly. "She belongs in the family photos." I was eventually included, positioned at the very edge of the group, where I later discovered I could be easily cropped out of the version that went on the Christmas card. It was a small victory that felt hollow under the circumstances. That night, Nathan finally seemed to truly see the pattern I'd been pointing out for years. "I'm sorry," he said as we got ready for bed in our guest room at his parents' house. "I should have been paying more attention. The way Mum treated you with the photos today, it wasn't right." "It wasn't right 2 years ago either," I said quietly, "or last year, or at the Cape House, or any of the other dozens of times she's made it clear I'm not really part of your family in her eyes." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "I know, I've been making excuses because it's easier than confronting her. That's not fair to you." "No," I agreed. "It's not." "I'll talk to her tomorrow," he promised. Really talk to her. Make it clear that this behaviour has to stop. I'd heard similar promises before, but something in his expression told me he meant it this time. And he did try. The next morning, he had a private conversation with his mother that I wasn't privy to, but which clearly didn't go well based on the strained atmosphere at breakfast and Vivian's red-rimmed eyes. Whatever was said, it didn't fundamentally change anything. Vivian became more careful, more subtle in her exclusions, but the pattern continued. Nathan would call her out occasionally, but more often than not, he'd miss the nuanced ways she found to remind me of my outsider status. It was exhausting constantly having to justify my place in my husband's life. But I loved Nathan, and I believed our marriage was worth fighting for. I just hadn't expected the fight to be so constant, so draining, or so one-sided. A month after that Christmas, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy Nathan and I felt was tremendous, but tempered by my apprehension about how Vivian would react. Would a grandchild finally help her see me as family, or would she find new ways to separate me from my own child in her narrative of the Hamilton legacy? As we prepared to share the news with both our families, I made a decision. It was time for Nathan's family to meet my father. The real Robert Sullivan, not the modest businessman I'd allowed them to believe he was. Maybe understanding who I really was wouldn't change Vivian's behavior, but at least it would strip away one of her perceived justifications for treating me as less than. Little did I know that this decision would lead to the confrontation that would finally force all of us to address the elephant that had been living in our family room for 3 years. I was 11 weeks pregnant when I decided it was time for our families to meet. The first trimester was nearly complete, and the doctor had assured us that the pregnancy was progressing normally. It felt like the right moment to bring our families together before announcing the news more widely. "I'd like to arrange a dinner," I told Nathan one evening. "With your parents and my dad. It's time they met, don't you think? Especially with a baby on the way." Nathan looked up from his laptop where he'd been reviewing building plans. "That's a great idea. It's overdue, honestly. Dad's been asking about meeting your father for ages." I took a deep breath. "There's something else. Something I should have told you a long time ago about my father." Nathan's expression shifted to one of concern. "Is everything okay?" "He's not ill, is he?" "No, nothing like that," I assured him. "It's about who he is. My father isn't just in the travel industry, like I've always said. He's Robert Sullivan." Nathan looked blank for a moment before recognition dawned. "Robert Sullivan, as in Sullivan Cruise Lines. That Robert Sullivan." I nodded, watching his face carefully. "Yes, I'm sorry I wasn't completely forthright about it. It's just... I've spent my whole life dealing with people who only wanted to be friends with Robert Sullivan's daughter, not with Erin. When we met, it was so refreshing to be just me, to know you were interested in me for myself." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. "So all this time, while my mother has been treating you like you're not good enough for our family, I've been the daughter of a man whose company could buy your family's assets several times over." I finished for him. "Yes." He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "The irony is, incredible. Why didn't you tell me or her? I wanted her to accept me for who I am, not for my family connections," I explained. "And honestly, would it have made a difference? Would you have wanted her to suddenly start treating me well just because my father is wealthy?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his internal conflict. "No, of course not. But it might have, I don't know, changed the dynamic somehow." "Maybe," I conceded. "Or maybe she would have just found other reasons to look down on me. The fact that I work for a living instead of managing a charity like a proper society wife. The fact that I don't come from old money. Something else." "You're probably right," he sighed. "So why tell me now? Why arrange this dinner?" I placed a hand protectively over my still flat stomach. "Because we're having a baby. Because I'm tired of the constant tension and exclusion. Because it's time for all the cards to be on the table." Nathan nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do it." "But can we not tell my parents about your father beforehand? I want to see my mother's face when she realizes." His slightly mischievous smile reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with him. Beneath the dutiful sun exterior was a man who could appreciate the absurdity of the situation we'd found ourselves in. "Deal." I agreed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. After 3 years of hiding a significant part of my identity from my husband's family, the prospect of finally being fully known was both terrifying and liberating. I arranged the dinner for the following Saturday at Menton, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. The fact that I was able to secure a last-minute reservation at a place that typically had a 3-month waiting list might have been a clue to the Hamiltons about my connections, but if they noticed, they didn't comment. My father was flying in specifically for the dinner, his private jet scheduled to arrive from New York that afternoon. He'd been surprisingly supportive of my decision to finally reveal our family's status. "It's about time," he'd said when I called to invite him. "I've been saying for years that you're making things harder on yourself for no good reason." I had my reasons, I reminded him, but now with the baby coming, it feels right to have everything out in the open. "Well, I'm looking forward to finally meeting this husband of yours properly," Dad said, "and his parents, especially this mother-in-law I've heard so much about." The evening of the dinner, I took extra care with my appearance, choosing a deep emerald sheath dress that complemented my eyes and wasn't yet revealing of my early pregnancy. Nathan looked handsome in a charcoal suit, his nervous energy manifesting in the way he kept adjusting his tie. "You look beautiful," he assured me as we got ready. "How are you feeling? Any nausea?" "Just the usual butterflies before any interaction with your mother." I joked, though it wasn't far from the truth. Morning sickness had been mild so far, but anxiety about the evening ahead was definitely turning my stomach. We arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, but Vivian and Gregory were already there. Vivian resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming in the intimate space of the restaurant foyer. "Erin, darling, you look healthy?" she said, her eyes sweeping over me in a way that made me instantly self-conscious. "That colour is very bold." "Thank you, Vivian. You look lovely as well." Gregory gave me a warm hug, his quiet kindness a balm after his wife's backhanded compliment. "You do look wonderful, Erin, positively glowing." If he suspected the reason for that glow, he didn't let on, but his smile seemed particularly warm. We were led to our table, a prime spot in the elegant dining room. Vivian immediately began commenting on the decor, the clientele, and how she and Gregory had dined there with the Abbotts just last month. A not-so-subtle reminder of their social connections. "Your father is joining us, correct?" she asked, checking her watch with a slight frown. "It's nearly 7. "He'll be here," I assured her. "His flight from New York was delayed a bit, but he texted that he's on his way." "Flight, I thought he lived in Boston like you," Vivian said, her attention suddenly more focused. "He has homes in several cities," I replied truthfully, though vaguely. "His business requires a lot of travel." "And what was his business again?" "Something in travel," Nathan mentioned. "That's right," I said, taking a sip of water to hide my smile. "He owns a company in the cruise industry." "Oh, how interesting," Vivian said clearly, trying to place this information within her mental hierarchy of acceptable professions. "A travel agency of some sort." "Something like that," Nathan interjected, squeezing my hand under the table. I could tell he was enjoying the slow reveal as much as I was. Vivian seemed ready to press for more details, but our server arrived to take drink orders, momentarily distracting her. As Nathan and Gregory discussed wine options with the sommelier, Vivian leaned toward me. "I've been meaning to talk to you about the summer plans," she said in a low voice. "The family is taking a cruise this year, the new Royal Caribbean ship that's launching in June. We've booked a block of suites for the whole family. It's quite exclusive, very luxurious." "That sounds lovely," I replied, genuinely interested despite myself. "Which ship is it?" "The Oasis of the Seas," she said with pride, as if she'd personally commissioned it. "We have the Royal Loft Suite for Gregory and myself, and adjoining grand suites for Nathan, Charlotte, and her husband, and my sister's family." I noticed the obvious omission immediately. "And where will I be staying?" Vivian's smile didn't waver. "Well, that's what I wanted to discuss. The booking was made some time ago before... Well, it's a family tradition, you see. The Hamilton summer trip has been a tradition for generations." "I see," I said slowly. "And after 3 years of marriage, I'm still not considered family enough to be included in this tradition." "It's not that, dear," she said, though her expression suggested it was exactly that. "It's just that the arrangements were made before you and Nathan were even dating. These premium suites are booked years in advance." It was a transparent lie. No cruise line, not even the most exclusive, required bookings years in advance. Months perhaps for the most premium suites during peak season, but not years. "So you're saying there's no way to adjust the booking to include me?" I pressed. Vivian's mask of politeness slipped slightly. "The truth is, Erin, this cruise is a bit above your usual experience level. The suite alone costs more than $20,000. I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable among people who are accustomed to that level of luxury." The condescension in her voice made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. "I appreciate your concern for my comfort, Vivian, but I assure you I can handle myself in luxury environments." "Of course you can, dear," She patted my hand patronizingly. But this is really a family tradition. You understand, don't you? Before I could respond, Nathan rejoined the conversation. What are you two discussing so intently? Your mother was just telling me about the family cruise this summer, I said, giving him a meaningful look. Apparently I'm not invited. Nathan's expression hardened. What, Mum? What is she talking about? Vivian's smile became strained. I was just explaining to Erin that the Hamilton summer cruise is a long-standing family tradition. The arrangements were made long ago. That doesn't explain why my wife wouldn't be included, Nathan said firmly. The suites are already booked, darling. There simply isn't room. Then we'll book another suite, Nathan insisted. Or change the existing booking. Vivian's smile disappeared entirely. Nathan, be reasonable. These are premium suites on one of the most exclusive ships in the world. We can't just change things at the last minute. Then I won't go either, Nathan stated flatly. Don't be ridiculous, Vivian snapped. You've never missed a family summer trip. What would everyone think? I don't care what anyone thinks. Erin is my wife. If she's not welcome, then neither am I. Gregory, who had been listening silently to the exchange, finally spoke up. Vivian, surely we can arrange something. If it's a matter of cost... It's not about the cost, Vivian interrupted sharply. It's about family traditions. Erin hasn't been part of these traditions. She doesn't understand their significance. How will she ever understand them if you don't include her? Gregory asked reasonably. Vivian's frustration was evident. She'd been backed into a corner and was looking for a way out. Finally, she turned to me with an expression of faux sincerity. Erin, dear, I'm just trying to protect our family traditions. Surely you understand that... Something in me snapped. 3 years of slights, exclusions, and condescension culminated in this moment of crystal clarity. I was done trying to win the approval of someone who had decided from day one that I would never be good enough. What I understand, Vivian, I said calmly, is that after 3 years of marriage to your son, you're still trying to exclude me from family events. What I understand is that you've never made a genuine effort to accept me as part of your family. What I understand is that you're using traditions as an excuse for behavior that is frankly inexcusable. The table fell silent. Nathan reached for my hand, squeezing it in silent support. Gregory looked uncomfortable, but not surprised, as if he'd been expecting this confrontation for some time. Vivian's face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me that way after everything we've done to welcome you? Welcome me, I interrupted incredulously. When have you ever truly welcomed me, Vivian? Was it when you seated me away from Nathan at family gatherings? When you forgot to include me on family emails? When you tried to exclude me from family photos? Or perhaps when you made it clear that I wasn't family enough to be included on your precious cruise? Nathan put his arm around my shoulders. Mom, Erin's right. This has gone on long enough. Either you accept that Erin is my wife, and therefore part of this family, or you're not welcome on our luxury family cruise. Vivian suddenly burst out, her composure completely broken. There is that direct enough for you. This cruise is for Hamiltons, real Hamiltons, not some social climbing event planner who clearly married my son for his connections. The restaurant seemed to go silent around us. Though logically, I knew the other diners were probably continuing their conversations, unaware of our family drama. Nathan looked shocked, Gregory mortified, and Vivian looked smugly satisfied, as if she'd finally said what she'd been thinking for 3 years. In that moment, a strange calm came over me. I smiled, picked up my phone, and dialed a number I knew by heart. What are you doing? Nathan asked quietly. Calling my father, I replied, my voice steady. Erin, please. Gregory began, clearly concerned about the escalating situation. Let's all take a breath. But I was beyond taking breaths. I was beyond trying to placate Vivian or pretend her behavior was acceptable. As the phone rang, I maintained eye contact with my mother-in-law, whose smug expression was beginning to falter slightly in the face of my unexpected response. Hi, Dad, I said when he answered. Are you on your way to the restaurant? Just about 5 minutes out, sweetheart, he replied. Traffic from the airport was terrible. Is everything okay? You sound tense. Actually, I need a favor, I said, still holding Vivian's gaze. You know that Royal Caribbean cruise the Hamiltons have booked for this summer? The Oasis of the Seas, I need you to cancel their reservations. All of them. Vivian's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as the implications of my request began to sink in. Cancel their reservations, Dad repeated. Erin, what's going on? I'll explain when you get here, I promised. But yes, I'd like their booking cancelled. It turns out I'm not welcome on their luxury family cruise, so I don't see why they should enjoy the hospitality of your ships. Vivian's face had drained of all colour. Your ships, she whispered. I ended the call and placed my phone calmly on the table. Yes, Vivian, my father's ships. Not literally. Royal Caribbean isn't part of Sullivan Cruise Lines. But my father is Robert Sullivan, founder and CEO of Sullivan Cruise Lines, and he sits on the board of the Cruise Line International Association. One call from him to his good friend Michael Bailey at Royal Caribbean, and your exclusive booking will vanish faster than your social standing when people find out how you've treated the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the luxury travel industry. The silence that followed was deafening. Gregory's jaw had literally dropped. Nathan, who had known this revelation was coming, but perhaps not in such dramatic fashion, was struggling to suppress a smile. And Vivian looked as if she might faint. You're Robert Sullivan's daughter. She finally managed her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I confirmed. The same Robert Sullivan who donated the new wing to Boston Children's Hospital that you bragged about attending the opening of last year. The same Robert Sullivan whose charity gala you tried to get an invitation to 2 years ago but couldn't. The same Robert Sullivan who owns the Sullivan Grand in Manhattan, where you so proudly told everyone you stayed during your last shopping trip. But you work as an event coordinator, Vivian stammered, as if this fact somehow disproved my identity. I do. I agreed. Because my father raised me to value hard work and to make my own way in the world. Because I wanted to be known for my own accomplishments, not my father's. Because I foolishly thought that might make people like you respect me for who I am rather than what I'm worth. A commotion at the restaurant entrance drew our attention. My father had arrived, his commanding presence causing a stir as he was led to our table. At 62, Robert Sullivan cut an impressive figure in his bespoke suit, his silver-streaked dark hair and confident stride, marking him as someone accustomed to authority. Sorry I'm late, he said, kissing me on the cheek before extending his hand to Nathan. Robert Sullivan, you must be Nathan. I've heard so much about you. It's an honor to meet you, sir, Nathan replied, standing to shake my father's hand. Dad turned to Gregory next. And you must be Gregory. Pleasure to meet you. Gregory, still looking shell-shocked, stood automatically and shook Dad's hand. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Sullivan. We had no idea. Please call me Robert, my father said warmly before turning to Vivian, who remained seated, seemingly frozen in place. And you must be Vivian. I've heard a great deal about you as well. The subtle emphasis on great deal wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Vivian finally managed to extend a limp hand, which my father shook briefly before taking his seat beside me. Now, he said pleasantly, as if we were discussing the weather rather than the social equivalent of a nuclear detonation. What's this about cancelling cruise reservations? Oh. The next 20 minutes at that dinner table were among the most excruciating and oddly satisfying moments of my life. My father, ever the consummate businessman, maintained a facade of pleasant interest as Vivian stammered through increasingly desperate attempts to explain away her behaviour. It was all a misunderstanding, she insisted, her usual poise completely abandoned, a joke that Erin took too seriously. Of course she's welcome on our family cruise. We wouldn't dream of excluding her. Dad raised an eyebrow, glancing at me before returning his attention to Vivian. From what I understand, this isn't an isolated incident. Erin has mentioned feeling unwelcome in your family for some time now. Erin is very sensitive. Vivian tried a flash of her usual condescension, briefly resurfacing. Sometimes she misinterprets things. Mom, Nathan interrupted firmly. Stop. You've been excluding and undermining Erin since the day I introduced you. We all know it. There's no point denying it now. Gregory nodded in agreement, finally finding his voice. Vivian, enough. What you said to Erin was inexcusable, and it's time to own up to it. Vivian looked around the table, realizing she had no allies in this fight. Her shoulders slumped slightly, the first genuine gesture I'd ever seen from her. I may have been less than welcoming at times, she admitted reluctantly. Less than welcoming, Nathan repeated incredulously. Mom, you just told my wife in a public restaurant that she wasn't welcome on our family vacation because she isn't a real Hamilton. That goes way beyond less than welcoming. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, though whether from genuine remorse or mortification at being caught out, I couldn't tell. I was upset. I didn't mean it. I think you did mean it, I said quietly. I think you've meant every slight, every exclusion, every backhanded compliment for the past 3 years. The only difference is that today you said it out loud. My father, who had been observing this exchange with the careful attention he typically reserved for business negotiations, finally spoke again. Mrs. Hamilton, he began, his tone polite but firm. Jimmo, I raised my daughter to be independent, hardworking, and to judge people by their character rather than their bank accounts or social status. It seems you've spent the last 3 years judging her by criteria that, ironically, she could have exceeded had she chosen to trade on the Sullivan name. Vivian's gaze dropped to the tablecloth, unable to meet my father's steady look. What I find particularly interesting, Dad continued, is that you seem to place such importance on social standing and connections, yet you failed to recognize the value of the very connection you were so intent on rejecting. I didn't know, Vivian whispered. And would it have made a difference if you had known? Dad asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Would Erin suddenly have been worthy of your respect if you'd known her father was wealthy? Because if so, that says a great deal more about your character than it does about hers. The waiter approached cautiously, sensing the tension at our table. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes? I think we need a moment, my father replied smoothly, and the waiter retreated gratefully. Nathan cleared his throat. There's something else we wanted to share tonight before all of this. He looked at me questioningly, and I nodded my permission. Erin and I are expecting a baby. We're going to have a child. The announcement landed in the midst of the tension, like a stone in still water, sending ripples of surprise through everyone except my father, whom I'd already told. Gregory's face lit up with genuine joy. That's wonderful news. Congratulations to you both. My father reached over to squeeze my hand. I couldn't be happier for you, sweetheart. Vivian's reaction was more complex. She looked genuinely shocked, then thoughtful, and finally her expression settled into something that resembled genuine emotion for perhaps the first time since I'd known her. A baby, she said softly. I'm going to be a grandmother. Yes, I confirmed. I'm 11 weeks along, due in October. That's why we wanted our families to meet tonight, Nathan explained. We thought it was important with a baby on the way that our families get to know each other. Vivian nodded slowly, her hand unconsciously moving to her strand of pearls, twisting them in what I'd come to recognize as a nervous gesture. I understand. She took a deep breath, seeming to gather herself. Erin, I owe you an apology, a genuine one. I waited, not making it easier for her. After 3 years of subtle cruelty, she would have to work for this reconciliation. My behavior has been inexcusable, she continued when I didn't respond. I've been unfair to you from the beginning, and I'm truly sorry. Why? I asked simply. Why have you been so determined to make me feel like an outsider? Vivian looked uncomfortable with the direct question. It's complicated. Nathan encouraged, his voice gentler now. For once, Mum, just be honest. She sighed, looking older suddenly. Nathan is my only son. When he brought you home, I saw how he looked at you, and I knew he was serious about you in a way he'd never been about anyone else. It frightened me. I felt like I was losing him. So you tried to drive me away? I asked. Not consciously, no, she said, and for once I believed she was being truthful. But I suppose I did try to maintain my position as the most important woman in his life. It was selfish and childish, and looking back I can see how harmful it was. It wasn't a complete explanation, but it was more honesty than I'd ever gotten from Vivian before. And if you had known who my father was, I pressed, would that have changed how you treated me? Vivian had the grace to look ashamed. Probably, she admitted, and that shames me more than anything else. That I would have valued you more for your connections than for making my son happy. Her admission hung in the air between us, raw and uncomfortable, but refreshingly honest. Where do we go from here? Nathan asked, looking between his mother and me. I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger to make Vivian suffer a fraction of the discomfort she'd inflicted on me for years. But another part, the part thinking of the child growing inside me, wanted to find a path forward, a way to create a healthier family dynamic for our baby. I think, I said slowly, that we start over, not forgetting what's happened, but agreeing to build something different moving forward. For the baby's sake, if nothing else. My father nodded approvingly. A wise approach. Vivian looked at me with what appeared to be genuine respect for the first time. I would like that very much, and I promised to do better to be better. Actions, not words, I said firmly. I've heard promises before. Understood, she agreed. I'll prove it to you day by day. The tension at the table eased slightly enough that we were able to finally order our meals and attempt something resembling normal conversation. My father, ever the diplomat, shared amusing stories from the cruise industry that had everyone, even Vivian, laughing by dessert. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Vivian approached me while the men were settling the bill, which my father insisted on paying, overriding Gregory's protests. I truly am sorry, Erin, she said quietly. Not just because of who your father turned out to be, but because I can see now how much pain I've caused. And I am genuinely excited about the baby. Thank you, I replied, not quite ready to fully forgive, but willing to acknowledge her apology. I hope you mean that for everyone's sake. I do, she assured me. And for what it's worth, I hope you'll still join us on the cruise this summer. As my son's wife and the mother of my grandchild, you absolutely are family. I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. About that cruise. You might want to check your booking. I wasn't entirely bluffing about my father's influence. Vivian's eyes widened in alarm, and I laughed the first genuine moment of humor between us. I'm kidding, I assured her. Mostly. But I think we might be able to arrange something even better than your Royal Caribbean booking if you're interested. As we left the restaurant, Nathan's arm around my waist and my father walking ahead with Gregory and Vivian, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. 3 years of hurt feelings and established patterns couldn't be erased in a single evening. But for the first time, I believed there might be a path forward that didn't require me to constantly fight for my place in this family. Nathan leaned down to whisper in my ear, "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. The look on my mother's face when she realized who your father was. I'll treasure that moment forever." I laughed softly. It wasn't how I planned to introduce them, but I have to admit it was satisfying. You know what else is satisfying, he asked, pulling me closer. Knowing that my brilliant, beautiful, successful wife didn't need her father's name or connections to build an amazing career and life for herself. That's the part my mother missed all these years. How extraordinary you are entirely on your own merits. His words warmed me more than any revelation about my family background could have, because in the end, that's what I'd wanted all along. To be valued for who I was, not what I was worth or who I was connected to. As we drove home that night, I placed a protective hand over my stomach, thinking of the child growing inside me. This baby would be born into a complicated family with a complicated history, but also one that was finally facing its issues honestly. And that I decided was a pretty good start. The months following that fateful dinner brought significant changes to our family dynamic. The most immediate and surprising was Vivian's genuine effort to make amends. She began by sending a beautiful arrangement of flowers to my office, with a card that simply read, "I'm sorry, I'll do better. Vivian." It was a small gesture, but its public nature, acknowledging me in my professional space, felt meaningful. When I called to thank her, our conversation was awkward, but sincere. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, "about why I felt so threatened by you. It wasn't just about losing Nathan, it was about my own insecurities." "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The Hamilton name, the social standing I've worked so hard to build. It's all been about proving myself worthy," she explained. "My parents were middle-class school teachers. When I married Gregory and entered his world of wealth and connections, I felt like an imposter. I've spent 35 years trying to prove I belong." Her vulnerability surprised me. I had no idea. "No one does," she admitted. "I've worked very hard to hide it. And then you came along, confident, successful in your own right, not impressed by the social standing I'd worked so hard to achieve. I think I recognized in you what I wished I'd been brave enough to be." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and while it didn't erase the hurt of the past 3 years, it helped me understand her behavior in a new light. The next sign of change came when Vivian invited me to lunch, just the two of us, to discuss the baby and nursery plans. I accepted with cautious optimism, and to my surprise, she spent the entire meal asking questions about my preferences and ideas rather than imposing her own. "I want to be clear," she said, as we were finishing our salads. "I don't expect to take over or make decisions about your child. I just want to be involved in whatever way you and Nathan are comfortable with." "I appreciate that," I replied. "And I do want our child to have a relationship with both grandparents, a healthy, respectful one." "That's what I want too," she agreed. "And I know I'll need guidance on what that looks like. I don't have the best track record with boundaries. Her self-awareness was refreshing, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that we might eventually develop a relationship based on mutual respect rather than tension and resentment. Nathan noticed the shift in his mother's behavior as well. "She's actually making an effort," he commented after Vivian called specifically to ask how I was feeling during a bout of particularly rough morning sickness. "I've never seen her work this hard at anything. People can change when properly motivated," I observed. And it turns out that the prospect of being excluded from her grandchild's life is pretty strong motivation. My pregnancy progressed smoothly after the first trimester. As my belly grew, so did the tentative new relationship between Vivian and me. We weren't best friends by any means, but we were establishing a more positive dynamic one interaction at a time. My father, true to his word, arranged for a Sullivan Cruise Line ship to host our extended family vacation that summer. At 5 months pregnant, I was still able to travel comfortably, and the week-long Mediterranean cruise became a turning point in our family relationships. Watching Vivian navigate the reality of being a guest on my father's ship was an education in humility. The deference shown to the Sullivan family by the crew, the way my father was greeted as royalty at every port, the luxurious owner's suite, that made the premium accommodations she'd booked on Royal Caribbean look modest in comparison. All of it forced her to recalibrate her understanding of status and hierarchy. To her credit, she handled it with grace. Rather than attempting to compete or assert her own importance, she seemed to genuinely enjoy the experience and the opportunity to get to know my father better. "Your dad is remarkable," she told me one evening as we sat on the private veranda of our suite watching the sunset over Santorini. The way he treats the staff, how he remembers everyone's names, his genuine interest in their lives. It's no wonder they all adore him. He believes that how you treat people who can do nothing for you reveals your true character, I said, sharing one of my father's favourite philosophies. Vivian was quiet for a moment. "I've spent so much of my life focused on impressing the right people. I never stopped to consider whether they were actually worth impressing." It was a profound realization from someone who had built her entire identity around social climbing, and it marked a significant shift in her worldview. The cruise also provided an opportunity for my father and Gregory to develop their own friendship. Despite their very different personalities, Dad's outgoing charm versus Gregory's quiet thoughtfulness, they discovered a shared interest in vintage cars and spent hours discussing restoration techniques and favourite models. Nathan thrived in this new tension-free family environment. Seeing him relaxed and happy, not constantly mediating between his mother and me, reminded me of the man I'd fallen in love with. "Thank you," he said one night, as we lay in bed, his hand resting protectively on my growing belly, "for not giving up on us, for giving my mother another chance, for creating this opportunity for our families to come together." "It was time," I replied simply, "for all of us." By the time our daughter Emma was born on a crisp October morning, the transformation in our family was remarkable. Vivian arrived at the hospital with my favourite flowers, not hers, and when she held Emma for the first time, the love in her eyes was unmistakable. "She's perfect," Vivian whispered gently, touching Emma's tiny fingers. "She has your eyes, Erin." "And Nathan's chin," I added, exhausted but elated. "Thank you," Vivian said, looking up at me with tears in her eyes, "for allowing me to be here to be part of this." I nodded, too emotional for words. In that moment, watching my mother-in-law cradle my daughter with such tenderness, I finally felt it. The sense of belonging of family that had eluded me for so long. Over the next years, Vivian continued to surprise me with her commitment to change. She respected our parenting decisions, asked permission before buying things for Emma, and made a genuine effort to develop a relationship with me independent of Nathan. We would never be best friends, but we became something I'd never thought possible. Family in the truest sense of the word. My father delighted in his role as Grandpa Bob, spoiled Emma shamelessly, but also instilled in her the same values he'd taught me: kindness, hard work, and judging people by their character rather than their wealth or status. Watching him teach my 3-year-old to captain a small boat during a family vacation brought tears to my eyes, the circle of our family expanding to embrace the next generation. 5 years after that confrontational dinner, as we celebrated Nathan's promotion to partner at his architecture firm, I looked around at our gathered family. My father deep in conversation with Gregory about classic car restoration, Vivian helping Emma with her colouring book, Nathan's arm around my waist as I held our second child, a son we'd named Robert Gregory, and marveled at how far we'd come. "Penny for your thoughts," Nathan murmured, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about that night at Menton," I replied. How close we came to a very different outcome. He nodded in understanding. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important changes. And sometimes being the cruise line owner's daughter has its perks, I added with a smile, echoing the words I'd spoken that night. Nathan laughed, pulling me closer. The best perk was watching my mother realize she'd spent 3 years looking down on someone who could have bought and sold her social status 100 times over. That was satisfying, I admitted. But the real victory wasn't about money or status. It was about finally being respected for who I am, not what I'm worth. As I watched Emma climb into Vivian's lap with a book asking her grandmother to read to her, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I'd questioned whether it was worth the struggle. But looking at my family now, imperfect, complicated, but genuinely loving, I knew that it had been. "You know what the real irony is," I said to Nathan. "In trying so hard to protect her family from what she saw as an outsider, your mother nearly lost the very thing she valued most. And in standing up for yourself, you gave her the chance to become a better person," Nathan replied. "That's the greatest gift anyone could have given her, even if she didn't know she needed it." As the evening wound down and we prepared to head home, Vivian approached me with Emma half asleep in her arms. "Thank you for today," she said softly, "for allowing me to be part of your lives after everything." "Family is family," I replied, the words holding a depth of meaning that would have been impossible 5 years earlier. With all its complications and challenges. Vivian smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I've learnt that family isn't about blood or names or social standing. It's about love and acceptance and forgiveness. Things I wasn't very good at before. We're all learning," I assured her, taking my sleepy daughter from her arms. "Every day." As we drove home that night, Emma and Robert both asleep in their car seats, Nathan reached over to take my hand. "Who would have thought," he mused, "that one moment of standing up for yourself would change our family forever?" "Sometimes," I replied, thinking of the long journey from exclusion to belonging. "The bravest thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve." And in that refusal, in that moment of finally saying enough, I had not only changed my own life, but had created the opportunity for healing and growth that had transformed our entire family. It wasn't about being Robert Sullivan's daughter, though that revelation had certainly provided a satisfying moment of justice. It was about having the courage to demand respect, to establish boundaries, and to believe in my own worth. As we pulled into our driveway, our sleeping children in the back seat and the warm lights of our home beckoning us inside, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led us exactly where we needed to be, to a family built on respect, acceptance, and love. And that was worth every difficult moment along the way. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who made you feel like an outsider in your own family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about family dynamics and standing up for yourself. And if you know someone who's struggling with difficult in-laws, share this video. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges can make all the difference. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it.